Something that took me way too long to figure out is that if you want to stop chasing clients every single month, you need to engineer demand. And without engineered demand, every single month, at the start of every month, it feels like you're pushing this giant boulder up a hill. Now, if you're a coach or a service-based business and you've experienced this, where you kind of feel like every single month you're starting from fresh, you're trying to push this giant boulder up the hill, this episode's going to be for you, because recently we've had a real big shift in terms of the way that we look at our business. And frankly, to be real with you guys, business has been really tough for me. Not because we're not making money or not because we're not growing the business. Last year we had our best year ever. We hit all these goals that we wanted to achieve. But it just hasn't felt that fun. It's felt like a grind. It's felt difficult. It's been a lot of hours, a lot of work, a lot of pushing the boulder up the hill. And we recently made a decision to say we don't want to play that game anymore. And one of the biggest factors that got me considering this shift in the first place was just looking at what is happening in the marketplace. Now, if you look at other online businesses, coaches, people that are succeeding, and you know what I mean when you say this, like you, no doubt in your mind, have seen a couple of different business owners in the online space that you perhaps at the moment are looking up to. You're consuming their content, you're looking at their business, perhaps you're a little bit envious of what it is that they've built. And when you look at unpacking some of these business owners and what they're doing, and for me in my industry, I'm looking at the likes of Alex Hormozy, Jeremy Haynes, Dan Martell, some of these big guys creating content and have really been creating content for a while. And from the outside looking in, it now looks very easy for their business. They have far more demand than they have supply, and they, because of that, are able to charge what they want, deliver in the way that they want, and ultimately set up their business in the way that they want. And we have this principle that we believe in very, very deeply here in our company and in my life personally, which is this principle that life should come first. Most of us as entrepreneurs, we start in business because we want freedom. We want to live life on our own terms, not be sat behind a desk every day. And where we end up to is, working our asses off for 80, 90, sometimes 100-hour weeks to make payroll and making a lot of money to just pay the team and ultimately not really making that much for yourself. And, if you're in a position like that right now, you'll know how that feels. And there are also lots of people that we help that aren't in that position. They're actually in thriving businesses where things are succeeding, but it feels like they're drowning because there's so much that's going on. And so this concept is really just a very simple economics concept, which is of supply and demand. If you look at the stock market, what's the reason that a stock increases or decreases? And somebody asked me that, and they said, why does a stock price go up or down? And I was like, well, maybe there's some news, maybe there's a new CEO that's been put in, maybe they're performing well. And none of those, in fact, are actually true. The reason that stock prices go up and go down is because there are more buyers or there are more sellers. A stock increases in price when there are more buyers, and a stock decreases in price when there are more sellers. So, for example, if you've been following Bitcoin and you see the price plummeting and the price going down, it's because a sell-off is happening. It means that lots of people are selling their Bitcoin as opposed to more people looking to buy Bitcoin, right? When a lot of people are buying Bitcoin, when a lot of people are going into that market, the prices rise. And this is how the supply and demand curve works. And the same is true in businesses. So, for example, if you imagine a local restaurant, imagine as a local brunch spot. Back when I went to visit my parents in England, we went to this amazing restaurant in Manchester. And it was about 9 in the morning, pretty early, all things considered, for going out for breakfast. And man, was there a queue outside that door. There was like 15 families, 15 groups of people that were already queued up to get into this restaurant. And it took us an hour to get seated in this restaurant. And I was thinking to myself, man, are we going to wait this whole time for breakfast? And my sister said, Jamie, trust me, it's going to be worth it. And when we got into that restaurant, they sat us down. There was no feeling of being rushed. even though there was tons of people that were still waiting outside to get in, we had nearly a 2-hour experience in that restaurant. They took care of us. They didn't make us feel rushed. When we were sat down and eating the food, which was excellent, by the way, it was just a wonderful experience, right? Now, on the flip side, I've been to lots of different cafes and restaurants where everything is rushed. They try and get you through it as quickly as possible. And, they're actually sometimes like haggling to try and get you in the front door in the first place. Which of those two types of experiences is more desirable? Well, intrinsically, the one that you are made to wait for and the one that has limited supply and limited access is going to feel more premium. It's going to feel like the thing that you actually want to go after. And so in order for us to be able to create a business where we don't feel like we're chasing customers every month, we have to look at engineering demand. And the great thing about demand is that it's something that can be created and manipulated to help you in business. There are supply and demand market things that happen. For example, in the dot-com boom, right, you had a ton of market growth and a ton of demand for any type of internet business. There was money being handed out left, right, and center. Right now, we're going through the AI boom, right? Kind of feels like any AI company with a pulse and a half-good idea is having money thrown at it, even though it doesn't really make any profit, right? Because there's a great demand right now for the next big thing. Now, those are market demands, and those are the big market swings. And if you're in a market like that, you're obviously going to benefit. But where I want to sit isn't to be at the whims of the market. What I want to do is actually be in control of my demand. I want to engineer my demand in a way that allows me to really live life first within my business and to do things the way that makes sense. And so the first thing to consider here is that most people want to sell everybody and have an unlimited supply. And so at the beginning of every month, you sit down, you go out, you try and sell your customers, and you try and sell as many of them as you possibly can. It would seem unfathomable for you to say no to somebody. And most of us don't really engineer or put together campaigns to introduce customers in the right ways. So for example, if you had a campaign that you were doing, do you just open the doors and say, hey, I've got this thing, book a call? Or do you spend 2 weeks building the demand, getting people excited? Do you give them teasers? Do you ask questions? Do you get them to, participate and get excited? A really great example of this is there's a great business owner that I love. His name's Ian. And he does a lot of his email marketing as the storefront in his business. All he does is email. And very frequently when he wants to create demand for something, he'll do a teaser. He'll do a launch campaign where he says, hey, I'm thinking of creating this thing right now. Literally just a couple days ago, he said, hey, at the moment, I'm going through the process of scaling up how much I spend every day to spend $1,000 every day and acquire customers every single day. And we want to acquire more customers every single day. We would like to be acquiring 100 customers a day. And so I'm thinking of putting a product together where I'm going to take you behind the scenes of me building this process, what's going on, the questions, the answers, and ultimately take you on the journey with me. So I'm thinking of putting this together. Is that something you guys would even be interested in? And that's called a hand raise. It gets people in your market to raise their hand and say, yeah, actually, that is something that I'm interested in. And he can now, over the course of a few days, a few weeks, drip it out a little bit further and get people excited. And so you can engineer demand by understanding that there are limited supply and demand constraints. You have to put a cap in terms of how many people are coming in. You can also engineer demand through the campaigns that you do. But a lot of people will say, well, Jamie, how do I even get interested people in my world in the first place? And one of the biggest things that is important to understand here is that this is not easy by any stretch of the imagination. In every market, there are those, top 0.1% of people that are that guy or that girl, and they seem to get all of the attention. They stand out as the best in the space. People recommend them, people talk about them, and everywhere you look and you turn, they seem to be the person that has mastered this. And when you can become the person in the space that is like that, demand becomes very simple. And what a lot of people forget is that building demand in that way really starts with you putting yourself out there. We had a person that replied to an email that I'd done on Monday, just really talking about this concept. He'd said, in the beginning in my business, I liked this idea of becoming, like a celebrity in my space, and I went to these conferences, and the first time I noticed it was, he said, I was at these conferences and people came up to me and said, man, I've read your LinkedIn posts. Even though he didn't have any comments, they'd come up to him and talk to him about it. And that same concept, he was like, wow, what if I take this further? What if I, take these talks that I've done for MIT and for Harvard, and I actually post those online and start putting that content out there? And what he ended up finding was that through the process of putting content out on a regular basis and publishing consistently, especially when he was doing these things which were highly credible, he was being verified by these third parties like MIT and Harvard, it really changed things in his business. And he told me he started having clients coming to him from a completely different perspective. And so what I want you to sit with inside of this, more than anything, rather than getting tactical and taking you through these components of supply and demand and how we engineer this and how we put campaigns together, what I want to pose to you in this podcast episode is a single question. And the question is really centered around how you want to be doing your business. There's a beautiful parable and story from Greek mythology about Sisyphus. He was this king that was arguably the smartest king in existence. He cheated death twice. The first time he cheated death, he tricked Thanatos, the god of death, into allowing him to live. He played a riddle in a game and he made a bet with him, and he beat death. And so he went on living. He cheated death once. And then for the second time, he got killed and he got brought into the underworld, and he convinced Persephone, who is the wife of Hades, to let him go back up to the surface, because his wife, he had to tell his wife something, and she'd be really mad at him if he didn't do that. What a great ploy. And he cheated death twice. And so the gods punished him for this, and the punishment that he was bestowed was to eternally be pushing a giant boulder up a hill, only to find that at the last moment, the boulder would roll back down again, and he would need to start over and over and over. And this dude was a strong guy. Pushing the boulder up the hill wasn't a problem. The issue was, at the end of the day, the boulder rolled down the hill. And I think about this a lot when it relates to people in their own business. The thing about Sisyphus is that he was condemned to be pushing this boulder up the hill. He was forced to. He didn't have a choice. He was stuck. But you have a choice in your business, and you don't have to eternally every single day be pushing the boulder up the hill only to find it rolls all the way down again. And in business and in marketing, the analogy of the rolling down the hill, that's the new marketing strategies, the new tactics. So many of you over the last 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years in business have continually rolled the boulder up the hill only to find at some point that it rolls back down again, and you have to start the process over. And we've done this in our business too. We've had situations where marketing strategies work and then they stop working. Things we try stop working. We have to change it. There's ever-changing tactics that you deploy. And the question isn't what's the best new boulder to put up the hill. The question is, how do we get off this hill entirely? And instead of pushing a boulder up a hill, what if we could have a small snowball that starts to roll and build momentum? Now, the reason I say that this is difficult is that most people don't have the discipline in order to start with a small snowball and know that it's going to become a big snowball as it rolls down the hill. But also a lot of people, frankly, just aren't good enough at what they do to become the best in the industry. But the thing about being the best and being perceived as the person that is the person in the industry is that even though this is really talking about fame and leveraging fame as a business model, you don't need to be Kim Kardashian famous. This isn't about ego. This is about you showing up in your space, in your niche, and not becoming famous, but becoming micro-famous. becoming famous to just the right kind of people. You know, if you just have 100 or 500 or 1,000 people that recognize you as the person that is the best at what you do, you can build a really powerful lifestyle business based on the back of that. If you want to build even a business to $100 million in valuation or bigger, you know, you don't need millions of people. Plenty of people do that with 10 or 20 or 30,000 people as well. And so that's the question I want you to think about on today's episode is, what game are you playing? Are you playing the game of eternal lead generation and getting customers, which is really just you have this endless supply that you're always trying to sell out? Or do you want to change tactics and start doing things differently, focusing on building demand and never satiating that demand? You know, in an ideal world, if you've got 40 people that want to buy something, you really only want 10 of them to be able to buy that thing. You know, if you think about that for a second, if you have a customer and in order for them to give you money, they have to go on a wait list and wait 3 months before they get the ability or the option to actually buy from you, think about how powerful that is. Pretty powerful stuff. So that's the game. And the question is, which game do you want to play? There's another great story I've got for you about Achilles and the 2 choices that he makes. But we'll wrap it there in this episode, and that's what I want you to think about. And if you want to know more about the process of building demand and demand generation, we'll talk about this more on the channel. We might even do a live workshop if that's something that would be interesting to you. I'm sure you're on my email list. If you're not already, you know, go down into the show notes. You can go to the Need a Guest group and join the group, and that will get you onto our email list. And yeah, we may do a workshop on this process of demand generation. Might do some content on it. Let me know. Let me know if you think that's interesting. All right. See you for now. We'll see you on the next episode.